Alright, this week's episode of Flash. I know the villain is called the Mist, but I just can't help calling him the Gas Man because that's ultimately what he is. He's the Gas Man. But I guess the Mist sounds cooler, so I guess I'm gonna call him Mist. But either way, he has an interesting story. I mean, the fact that he technically died when he got his powers, so exactly how he came back to life, I have no idea. Or maybe he really is dead and it's just the gas that technically keeps him alive. I don't know how that would work. In fact, the fact that they said that he's dead tells me that they had to at least see a body. Maybe that wasn't his body. Maybe it's his soul that's turned into gas. I don't know how this power thing works, but either way, it's just so strange. But either way, he's a threat because you can't really hit him, and the way they do beat him is kind of clever in a way, but it comes down to there's not enough information about this person. We get a bit of background, but that's it. Just like new villain of the week, defeat him, gone, he's now in jail. And this new concept that they're introducing, that they can turn the particle accelerator into a makeshift prison for all these new metahumans, just tells me that they're going to be doing this for a long time. They're going to have villain after villain after villain after villain, and I honestly don't think that's a good idea because it's going to get really boring. In fact, it's almost getting boring now. The only thing that keeps me interested in any villain related news is Wells, but even then he doesn't seem like much of a villain because he seems very dedicated to protecting Flash from any sort of harm, and that ultimately does not give to a threat to Flash. And that's what most superhero stories need, a threat to the superhero we're following. But then again, maybe what he's planning for the Flash will involve hurting Central City or involve hurting the people closest to Flash, and that in a way is still a major threat, because without the friends or family or a city to protect, a superhero is no longer human. He has no connection. He's just an icon, similar to what Batman does. Batman will just throw away everything just to continue being a superhero, protecting the world. But you have to admit that without any of those things, we would never get to see Bruce Wayne. We would never get to know the man behind the mask. He would just be nothing but a mask, and that ultimately would not evolve his character. In other words, it would destroy their humanity, ironically. So a threat to a superhero's humanity is still a big threat, but at this point, I don't think that's what they're going for with Wells. But either way, this episode focuses a lot more on, again, flashbacks. And I guess that's not too bad, but again, it's a repeat from the last two episodes. So they shouldn't focus too much on it because we already understand what they're all going through. But it's nice to see Caitlin Snow and Cisco, having flashbacks as to what happened to, Snow's fiance, and exactly what kind of guy he was. And he seemed nice enough, and I can believe that they're hurting over it. But at the same time, they don't really blame themselves. It's just a bad thing that happened. They can't get over it, but with enough time that maybe they can move on and look back and see him as a hero. And he really was. But I'm going to say this now. I don't think he's really dead, because usually in comic books, when someone is hit with the core of the radiation explosion, they're not usually dead. They just get the most powerful, all the superpowers. Maybe it's going to come back as some ultimate being that can control matter or something, because he was at the very core of it all, the whole mess. But yeah, for now, it's good to see how everyone reacted to his death. And even then, Wells is smiling, even in the flashback when he hears that this guy died. But maybe that's because he knows he didn't die. He's like, okay, now he's getting his powers like he should be. And even has a camera already set up in Barry's lab. And I'm just wondering exactly what his connection to Barry is. Now, I've been reading some comments that say that he looks a lot like Barry would if he were older. And I think I can see that, but I don't know if I want to say that he's Barry from the future. Because what would happen so badly that would turn Barry into this guy who's willing to kill others to protect his past self? I mean, Barry just doesn't seem that kind of guy, and it shows in this episode when he's so childish and naive in the fact that he wants to break his father out of prison and not knowing, thinking of the consequences. Which some could say that's dumb. He's an adult. He should know better. But I don't know. The fact that he's been locked up in his room, in his lab, most of his life, just constantly, poring over all these notes and all this evidence, and never really allowing himself to grow up normally as a child, would give me some suspension of disbelief in the thought that he really never grew up. He's still sort of a child, especially in what it means to be a hero. So it's good to see Joe come in and tell him, sometimes you can't save everyone. For every one life you save, there are going to be 3 more out there that just lost theirs, and you can't help that. You can't focus on what you can't do, what you didn't do. Just focus on what you can, and that's great. And especially when he says the worst criminal, or the worst threat you'll ever face is not some superpowered mastermind out there. It's the thought that you couldn't save someone. That regret you'll have on you for the rest of your life. That heavy burden that will slow you down and will affect any future rescues. And that's fantastic. And to see Joe also going through his own little arc, regretting putting his own friend in jail, never believing him. But you gotta admit, when you hear a story, it's like lightning came into the room and it killed her. It's like, I don't believe you, dude. You gotta go. I know you're my friend, but the evidence is against you. So I can't really blame Joe, but it's nice to see that he's really hurting over it. There was a very good friendship between Joe and Barry's father. Even Barry's father seems, kind of happy, but at the same time doesn't really care anymore that he's in prison. He doesn't care anymore about getting out. He's just happy to see his son, out there living his life, and the fact that Joe, is still sticking to what he believes is right. And the only other story that happened in this episode was Iris and I'm gonna say Eddie, I think his name's Eddie, Joe's partner, and their relationship, and the fact that to reveal the truth to her father. And I guess it's nice to see it, but I don't know. These two characters haven't had that much time to present themselves as good, well-constructed characters yet. They're just there for a side story about romance, and it's alright. It's just kind of more of a distraction, and I don't think it should be that way, because Iris, despite not really being Barry's love interest for the most part, she seems like she'd be a more important person to have in this story. She grew up with Barry. She was his first love, and she's also the daughter of Joe, the head detective who put Barry's father away. Now is trying to get him out. And now she's following up on the Red Blur. She's gonna probably find out who the Flash really is. But she hasn't done much yet. But I'm hoping that changes soon. But as for the rest of the episode, like I said, a lot of elements have been repeating themselves lately, and that's not a good sign. Hopefully they do mix it up enough that the season won't do so badly, and hopefully Wells' reveal won't be too predictable. But either way, here's to hoping that the next episode is even better than the last. So until then, I'm Tony Dragon. Bye bye.